5th grade, it's Mrs. Pecori here, back with reading Roald Dahl's The Witches. I'm sitting back outside on this beautiful fall day, so you might hear some fall sounds like birds and chipmunks, and you might hear the wind, and that's why my camera is moving so much, is because the wind is blowing it here. So I'm sorry, I hope it doesn't make you sick to watch it. And you might also hear my puppy barking at random things because he's sitting out on the deck with me and he likes to bark at various things. Leaves, birds, my neighbor, so we'll see. So we left off, the little boy was sitting with his grandmother and she was talking about how to spot a witch. One was, they always wear gloves because they have pointy claws. They're bald, so they always wear wigs. And they have square feet, but they still wear pointy shoes like most human women do. And the last thing we learned about was their spit. Their spit is blue, which is kind of strange. So that's where we left off. So let's continue reading The Witches by Roald Dahl. And let's see here. We left off about the spit. "It would if she spat," I said. "Witches never spit," my grandmother said. "They daren't." I couldn't believe my grandmother would be lying to me. She went to church every morning of the week, and she said grace before every meal. And somebody who did that would never tell lies. I was beginning to believe every word she spoke. "So there you are," my grandmother said. "That's about all I can tell you. None of it is very helpful. You can still never be absolutely sure whether a woman is a witch or not just by looking at her. But if she is wearing the gloves, if she has large nose holes, weird eyes, and the hair that looks as though it might be a wig, and if she has a bluish tinge on her teeth, if she has all of these things, then you run like mad." "Grandmama," I said, "when you were a little girl, did you ever meet a witch?" "Once," my grandmother said. "Only once." "What happened?" "I'm not going to tell you," she said. "It would frighten you out of your skin and give you bad dreams." "Please tell me," I begged. "No," she said. "Certain things are too horrible to talk about." Does it have something to do with your missing thumb?" I asked. Suddenly, her old wrinkled lips shut tight as a pair of tongs, and the hand that held the cigar, which had no thumb on it, began to quiver very slightly. I waited. She didn't look at me. She didn't speak. All of a sudden, she had shut herself off completely. The conversation was finished. "Good night, Grandmama," I said, rising from the floor and kissing her on the cheek. She didn't move. I crept out of the room and went to my bedroom. The Grand High Witch. Trying to center this for you, boys and girls. The next day, a man in a black suit arrived at the house carrying a briefcase, and he held a long conversation with my grandmother in the living room. I was not allowed in while he was there, but when at last he went away, my grandmother came in, walking very slowly and looking very sad. "That man was reading me your father's will," she said. "What's a will?" I asked her. "It is something you write before you die," she said, "and in it you say who is going to have your money and your property. But most important of all, it says who is going to look after your child if both the mother and father are dead." A fearful panic took hold of me. "It did say you, Grandmama," I cried. "I don't have to go with somebody else, do I?" "No," she said. "Your father would never have done that. He asked me to take care of you for as long as I live. But he has also asked that I take you back to your own house in England. He wants us to stay there." "But why?" I said. "Why can't we stay here in Norway? You would hate to live anywhere else. You told me you would." "I know," she said. "But there are a lot of complications with money and with the house that you wouldn't understand. Also, it said in the will that although your family is Norwegian, you were born in England and you have started your education there, and he wants you to continue going to English schools." "Oh, Grandmama," I cried, "you don't want to go and live in our English house. I know you don't." "Of course I don't," she said, "but I am afraid I must. The will said your mother felt the same way about it, and it is important to respect the wishes of the parents." There was no way out of it. We had to go to England, and my grandmother started making arrangements at once. "Your next school term begins in a few days," she said, "so we don't have any time to waste." On the evening before we left for England, my grandmother got on her favorite subject once again. "There are not as many witches in England as there is in Norway," she said. "I'm sure I won't meet one," I said. "I sincerely hope you won't," she said, "because those English witches are probably the most vicious in the whole world." As she sat there smoking her foul cigar and talking away, I kept looking at the hand with the missing thumb. I couldn't help it. I was fascinated by it, and I kept wondering what awful thing had happened that time when she had met a witch. It must have been something absolutely appalling and gruesome, otherwise she would have told me about it. Maybe the thumb had been twisted off, or perhaps she had been forced to jam her thumb down the spout of a boiling kettle until it steamed away. Or did someone pull it out of her hand like a tooth? I couldn't help trying to guess. "Tell me what those English witches do, Grandmama," I said. "Well," she said, sucking away at her stinking cigar, "their favorite ruse is to mix up a powder that will turn a child into some creature or other that all grown-ups hate." "What sort of a creature, Grandmama?" "Often it's a slug," she said. "A slug is one of their favorites. Then the grown-ups step on the slug and squash it without knowing it's a child." "That's perfectly beastly," I cried. "Or it might be a flea," my grandmother said. "They might turn you into a flea, and without realizing what she was doing, your own mother would get off the flea powder, and then it's goodbye to you." "You're making me nervous, Grandmama. I don't think I want to go back to England." "I've known English witches," she went on, "who have turned children into pheasants and then sneaked the pheasants into the woods the very day that the pheasant shooting season was opened." "Ouch," I said. "So they get shot?" "Of course they get shot," she said. "And then they get plucked and roasted and eaten for supper." I pictured myself as a pheasant flying frantically over the men with the guns, swerving and dipping as the guns exploded below me. "Yes," my grandmother said. "It gives the English witches great pleasure to stand back and watch the grown-ups doing away with their own children." "I really don't want to go to England, Grandmama." "Of course you don't," she said. "Nor do I, but I'm afraid we've got to go." "Are witches different in every country?" I asked. "Completely different," my grandmother said. "But I don't know much about the other countries." "Don't you even know about America?" I asked. "Not really," she answered. "Although I have heard it said that over there the witches are able to make the grown-ups eat their own children." "Never!" I cried. "Oh, no, Grandmama, that couldn't be true." "I don't know whether it's true or not," she said. "It's only a rumor I've heard." "But how could they possibly make them eat their own children?" I asked. "By turning them into hot dogs," she said. "That wouldn't be too difficult for a clever witch." "Does every single country in the world have its witches?" I asked. "Wherever you find people, you find witches," my grandmother said. "There's a secret society of witches in every country." "And do they all know one another, Grandmama?" "They do not," she said. "A witch only knows the witches in her own country. She is strictly forbidden to communicate with any foreign witches. But an English witch, for example, will know all the other witches in England. They are all friends. They ring each other up. They swoop deadly recipes. Goodness knows what else they talk about. I hate to think." I sat down on the floor watching my grandmother. She put her cigar stub in the ashtray and folded her hands across her stomach. "Once a year," she went on, "the witches of each separate country hold their own secret meeting. They all get together in one place to receive a lecture from the grand high witch of all the world." "From who?" Oops, sorry, boys and girls, I cried. "She is the ruler of them all," my grandmother said. "She is all-powerful. She is without mercy. All the other witches are petrified of her. They see her only once a year at the annual meeting. She goes there to whip up excitement and enthusiasm and give orders. The grand high witch travels from country to country attending these annual meetings." "Where do they have these meetings, Grandmama?" "There are all sorts of rumors," my grandmother answered. "I have heard it said that they just book into a hotel like any other group of women who are holding a meeting. I have also heard it said that some peculiar things go on in the hotels they stay in. It is rumored that the beds are never slept in, and there are burn marks on the bedroom carpets, and that toads are discovered in the bathtubs, and that down in the kitchen the cook once found a baby crocodile swimming in a saucepan of soup." My grandmother picked up her cigar and took another puff, inhaling the foul smoke deeply into her lungs. "Where does the Grand High Witch live when she's at home?" "Nobody knows," my grandmother said. "If we knew that, then she could be rooted out and destroyed. Witchophiles all over the world have spent their lives trying to discover the secret headquarters of the Grand High Witch. What's a witchophile, Grandmama? Oh, boys and girls, we have to stop there. So we'll read tomorrow, see what a witchophile is, and Roald Dahl's The Witches. Bye-bye.